Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this symposium on farmers' access to data. My name is Gretchen Chimwaza, and I'm the director of ITOCA, which is Information Training and Outreach Center for Africa. It is a collaborative event, but I will mention 4 of the partners that are within this session today, this symposium. We've got GFAR, the Global Forum for Agricultural Research. We also have got ITOCA. I mentioned that I'm from the Information Training and Outreach Center for Africa. And we've got GODAN, which is represented here at the Global Open Data and Agriculture and Nutrition. That's correct. And then, of course, CTA are also involved. So I would like to introduce my colleague here, Valeria Pesci, who is coming from GFAR. And she will take the opportunity to introduce all our partners, and they'll get a chance to also give us a few words in terms of opening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. As Gretchen was saying, I work for the Global Forum on Agricultural Research and Innovation, GFAR, and we decided to convene this event together with all the partners. The reason why we wanted to do it is GFAR has a long history of work around issues of open data on one side and farmers' rights on the other side. And in the last years, we worked a lot on raising awareness about data rights issues and data ownership issues, especially concerning smallholder farmers. So we convened the training course we had in the last 4 days, where we had a wonderful group of 17 participants from 14 countries. They're all here today. And today we have the symposium. Gretchen described the structure of the symposium. And I want to introduce the other partners that collaborated with us. CTA is not here, but we thank them. And then we have a representative from the Global Open Data Initiative for Agriculture and Nutrition, GODAN, Michael Brobby.
Thank you, Valeria. On behalf of GODAN, I'd like to welcome all of you to the symposium on farmers' access to data. We at GODAN, Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition, we are keen to promote open data. That's something we do proactively within our network. We're a partnership network with over 600 partners, all keen on bringing about open data so that it can help address issues of nutrition and agriculture. And we at GODAN, we've been exploring the issue of data rights and ownership, and we have been doing that also with GFAR, hence our presence here at this event, and we're so happy to be here. We're happy that all of you are here to be a part of this conversation. And as we discuss these issues and come up with practical solutions, we'll be able to help solve food security. And that's what it's about, because sometimes when we're going through life, we tend to neglect the farmers. And it's important that we value them and the contribution they make to our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I also want to thank other 2 institutions, 2 South African institutions that contributed a lot to the program of the training, and they also contributed 2 trainers who are not here today, unfortunately. The 2 institutions are the Department for Agriculture and Forestry and Fisheries of South Africa and the CSIR of South Africa. And then I want to introduce Dan, who is going to be one of the speakers today, but he was also the lead trainer in the training we had in the past days. So he's the sort of the liaison, the trade union between the training and the symposium. Dan Byrne.
Thanks, Valeria, and good morning, everyone. Great to be here. One of the things that we discovered during this last week's training, particularly people from so many different countries, is that while we support open data, and one of the organizations I work for back in the United States is called A Gateway, and we work on open data standards and deal with legal data ownership issues, working with the American Farm Bureau and others. But we know that it's one thing to say that we want farmers and growers to have access to data, and it's another thing to say, how can we make it useful? How can we give them actual insights? How can we do it in a way that is not overwhelming the first time that you try to get us? So that's what we spend quite a bit of time in the training this week, and we're going to reflect some of that in the talks today, but I think at the end too, we want to keep all this work going so that it isn't just information sharing, we actually start to develop some strategies to move it ahead. So I hope you have a good day.
Friends, good morning. Let me formally thank the organizers of this symposium to invite me. Anyway, friends, this issue of farmers and data is a pretty old situation. If you really look at it, as soon as we domesticated plants and we started working on agriculture or farming, we had this issue. If you look at the Nilometer in Egypt, the one that measures the flood level of the Nile, about 5,000 years ago, not even five, more than 5,000, 7,000 years ago it was created. And it was a data system. What happened was that the control of that data was with the pharaoh. Today also we have the same issues. The paradigm of agriculture or farming keeps on changing. And each time it has changed, new things have happened, new ways of data collection, data processing, data management, gathering information from it have happened. So how do we then look at it? Now, why do you think we have got this issue now? Because as Valeria said, we started working on informatics in GFAR in 1999. And the first time we talked about farmers and data issues was somewhere in 2008, 2009. This was long before GODAN and others looked at it. The core issue to me, and I can be questioned on that, is that three things have really happened. The first is that with WTO and others and globalization of agricultural markets have happened, and they are highly competitive. Since these are very competitive, certain things have come up in participation in those markets. So one of that is that reason. The second reason, which I think is much more important, has been the issue. Can I have the first slide? Yeah, the first. Has been the issue of what we can say the scarcity of resources. Say, take for example, water. Water has become very scarce. A large part of water in developing countries and developed countries, and most of the water deficiencies are in the south, is being because of the industrialization, this water is being taken away into industry, and agriculture is being portrayed as the largest user of water, but it's not so, and it's being wasted. Another issue is urbanization. So agriculture overall in developing countries is getting lesser and lesser water. Similarly, soil nutrients is a scarce resource, and that is again affecting. And the third issue, which I think is going to become even more important, is climatic aberrations that we are getting. The only way to cope this would be to understand how it influences agricultural and agri-food systems. So these are the three core issues that are happening at the moment. Also, this whole issue of data has been brought to the forefront because of digitization and electronics, and the ability to collect a lot of data. Also, the ease of spreading and sharing this data has happened. So these are some of the interesting points that have brought us to this particular situation, and that we are all sitting here and discussing it. I want to look at three issues. What are the perspectives of farmers about data and data management in data-driven agriculture? How much do we know about what farmers know or feel about or their perspective about this? What are the benefits and hazards of data sharing for farmers as expected in data-driven agriculture? And of course, then if we find things are not up to the mark, what is required for balance, symmetry, equity, and fairness in data and information flows? And use, remember, it's not only the collection of data. GFAR has been pushing this right from a long time. In fact, in GODAN, it has been very vociferous, saying don't only look at exchange and sharing of data, look at the use of data, the ability to use data effectively. And this is the term which we always use. You can use data and you can use data effectively has been our core issues. So let me start with the first. Of course, agriculture is changing fast, and believe me, what I had about 3 years ago as an understanding of agriculture is not almost has a half-life of about 3 years. So what I had known about agriculture is in its policy environment, in its entire entity of understanding, is changing very fast. We will be overwhelmed within 5 to 7 years. And there are reasons for that when we talk of this. So as I said, that agriculture is becoming increasingly data-driven. Let us not forget that there are three components to this whole change that we are seeing. It's becoming data-driven, it is becoming information-rich, and it is becoming knowledge-intensive. Farmers need to know much more every season than they knew previously to practice agriculture today. Those 3 points are there: participating in globally competitive markets, access to natural resources, especially water, land, and soil nutrients, extreme aberrations of weather and climate change. I can give you a recent example. About 2 years ago, we were doing a workshop on forward-thinking agricultural development in Western India. And in India, we have tribal farmers, the Aravalli region. If you look at Western India, you find a hill range, which is called Aravalli. And that is inhabited by tribal populations. These farmers are supposed to be the most backward, low literacy levels, small farms. But now they have started shifting into spices, medicinal plants, and into horticulture, vegetables, fruits. So one young man, about 30 years old, kept on coming to me and saying, you know, in India we say, Sahib, sir, can you ask this university to help me manage my data? And I said, why? And at the same time, in that meeting, we had people who are exporters from India, and they export to various countries. One of the areas that they export to is Europe. They have Euro gap as the standard that they have to comply with if they want to export. Now the Euro gap is the good agricultural practices, compliance is needed. And to comply that, farmers have to keep records, total records. You need a computer to do that. Now these are the type of issues. Now if a smallholder farmer from a very backward part of India, because of the pressures of participating in globally competitive markets, start talking about data, recording, managing, using, etc., etc. So let us see how these things, I'm sure when I talked to even the university had no clue how to do that. There are a large number of small applications developed as a master's research program or something. It deals with something little, you know. And you have seen all those apps. There are more than 11,000 apps around farmers available, even in India. But are they useful to anyone, is the question. Next, please. As I said, it is facilitated by, by IT. And that IT is moving very, very fast. Something which about 3 years ago I wanted to buy, a sensor-based system, was costing 120 rupees. Today I can get it on Amazon for about $2. So the price has come down, the availability has grown so much that you get it on Amazon. And it's linked to Raspberry Pi, so even a school boy can learn. I'm sure you know what Raspberry Pi is. It's a small, cheap computer. Okay, can I? Next. Now, there are two core issues which I find a lot of confusion about. When we talk of farming and agriculture, there is a different set of data that is handled at the farm level. And that I call it, and this is what the USDA even calls it, as precision farming or precision agriculture. But there is another concept that has been brought about in Europe, which they call as agriculture 4.0. Now this agricultural 4.0, they have only talked about profitability and optimization. But I am looking at slightly beyond that concept and saying that this data-driven agriculture, and I use another term, evidence-based data-driven agriculture, because there is a very important, data itself is not going to help. You have to have the evidence of, based on the data, to take up an intervention in farming. And that is a very important understanding that we must have. Are you able to listen to me back? Am I clear there? Right. So I say that it must maximize profitability while optimizing productivity, quality, time, and reducing human drudgery in farming and agriculture across the entire agricultural production chain, from input to consumption and waste management. Data-driven agriculture, to me, is looking at the whole agri-food system, from input to consumption and wastage that happens within that system at various nodes, if you look at it as a system. Next, please. Now, this is the type of data flows that we are having in this particular data-driven agriculture, digital agriculture. And this is what I mean to say, that from input to consumption, if you can, I'm sorry, this is a much larger one, but there are three flows in this system. The system has, first of all, the commodity flow, which comes from input and goes till consumption. In the reverse direction, we have another flow of finance, money that comes from consumption or consumers and goes all the way till input providers. Now these are linear, largely linear flows. But there's the third flow, which is the information flow. And that information flow is like in a network. And that control of that flow becomes very, very difficult, because it's in a network. And that is why I use terms like symmetry. Symmetry of information flows. The flows must be symmetric among themselves and across themselves. Supposing if the financial flow is blocked, the information flow does not work. If the commodity flow and the financial flows are not supported by information, the market system fails, what we call as market failures. So each time you look at a market success or a market failure, a large part of it would be dependent on the balance between these flows. So this is the first issue that we must keep in mind, because if you understand the framework under which we are discussing this, it becomes easier. Next, please. Okay, this one, right. Of course, when a farmer uses data, there are 4 types of data. One, that the farmer generates and uses for his or her farm. That data has little value elsewhere, though almost all data has got value from the farmer, whatever he generates. Then the farmer gets from outside and it is used on his farm, say market price, that's something that he gets from outside but uses it for his farming. And the third one is that the farmer generates, but it is used outside his farm. He doesn't get any benefit from that data. Of course, then there are certain things which I call as static data that like land records, they don't change over a period of time. They change, but for long periods of time, they don't change. Oh, it's a pointer. Now, the use of data, now I'm more focused on the use of data by farmers. Other actors and stakeholders will come to. The use of data by farmers is event-driven, and according to the farming cycle and for a crop. It's crop-based. The land is static, of course. And I've said this issue about dynamic and static data. And the quantum of data a farmer manages depends on the crop and its value. If it's low value, the data is not intensive. Space, plot, field, farm, local community of farmers, time of cropping cycle, capacity to manage and use data, data tools available, precision desired, all those factors depend on, have a direct relationship to the quantum of data. This is a project that I'm working on in Gujarat. It started in March, but we are still struggling to get things moving. The funds are there, but the system, the bureaucracy, because you will realize the number of actors in this sort of a program. Now, what we are looking at is the farmer is registered, we know his land, we know all the other details. We provide them with a crop calendar, depending on a set of crops. About 8 crops have been mandated by the government of India, but we are looking at 32 crops. These are all smallholder farmers owning between, say, 6 to 8 bighas of land, which is about 1 to 1.25 acres of land. But if you look at the type now, then they also need farm machinery, which is not owned by them, but leased through or come as a rental. The extension system has to be linked. The system is that we take GIS-based data and we take physical data, we do ground truthing, we have hyperspectral and multispectral pattern matching done. The whole idea is to bring in a new system of extension. The data that they also need to get is climate data from agrometeorology, which is from IMD, the ENAM, the Electronic National Agriculture Market, which gives the price and price forecasts, soil health card, which gives the soil conditions, the goods agricultural standards for crops, fertilizer suppliers who get data from the demand on fertilizers, but also give data on the type of data or on the type of fertilizers they stock, what will be the price, what is the type of fertilizer, FIM and vermiculture, compost, pesticide, seed, labor, processors, transporters, insurance, bank. The government needs a lot of data. It has to give data as soon as the rains happen in monsoon season, which we call the Kharif season or the Rabi. It has to give what is the crop zone, because that affects other markets. We have found out that this type of data affects gold market in India. Rural, if there is a good rural, it's a good agriculture for that year, farming, the harvest is good, gold prices go up. Farming is not good, gold prices goes into white goods, ACs, cars, washing machines, the prices change. Now the implications of that data, then you can understand. My only point here is, say take for example, we have the Narmada Ayog, which is the Commission on the Use of Narmada River Waters. They need to know about 15 days before when to release the water. If we can give them a forecast of that water, they can benefit. The water can be used much better. So there are so many such applications, insurance, subsidies, farmer support by the government, all those issues that government needs a lot of data. Next, please. Okay. So when we talk of data, and when many a times we say, broadly data sharing must be done or data exchange, that data must be given a context. I've seen lots of weather data being given in India. Okay, it will rain tomorrow. Fine. So what? Does it do, what farm operation do I take? We are working on a system in which we would be able to predict the spread of certain diseases on the basis of climatic data or weather data. Data and information are intertwined, as I was saying. Don't separate them out. Don't say that data is only looked at. I would say farmers' access to data, information, and knowledge should have been the topic that we would be discussing today. Because then that becomes a very, very important issue. Just data is at a very syntactic level. Okay, so what? The farmer doesn't understand that. Next. Also, not all agriculture data is directly useful to farmers. I'm sure you would realize this. My own realization has been that a large amount of data being generated by the so-called repositories, international and national, are totally useless. I'm making a very strong statement. They have no clue on what information and data farmers need and how to use it, or how to enable it to be used effectively. However, all data that farmers generate is in some way useful to other actors. So if you look at it from a farmer-centric perspective, he's being conned. Simple as that. If there was a sort of a balance, that balance is not there. The government takes data. How many of you have worked as a farmer or understand land rights in most developing countries? The government tells the farmer, give me how much land you own, what you produce, what was the profit, blah, 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 blah. Can it go and ask the same questions to the private sector? It can't. Then why the farmer? Because he's powerless, politically, financially, and knowledge-wise. He doesn't understand that data can be used. In fact, the government doesn't use that data is another thing, but the truth remains. Next, please. So these are some of the issues that farmers face around data: availability, accessibility, affordability, capacity to appropriate, get the ownership. This is a French concept of appropriation. And I've had a lot of discussions on this with CGIR when they took out the AAA, and I said to Peter that we should have 4 A's. The appropriation by a community becomes a very, very important issue. If the community doesn't appropriate that information, doesn't make its own, it won't use it. It will not add to that information. Of course, relevance, usefulness, timeliness, trustworthiness, and the ability to use data and information. If you look at any of these problems that you get under data systems, you will find one of these as the cause or several of these as the cost. Well, these are the benefits. I'm sure it's better to bargain, get economical logistics, better market-related forecast, better forecast for disease and pest control, greater opportunities for innovation. Next, please. Same, more realistic research, and I'm increasingly convinced that the research that we are doing now, agricultural research or what goes on as agricultural research, is almost becoming useless. You might say, why is this guy telling everything is becoming useless? There's a huge paradigm shift. And if you read Kuhn or others, you find that in every paradigm shift, the old goes and the new comes in. The type of research I need today to help these farmers in GeoAgri Gujarat is just not there. Rate and data experiments don't tell me anything. You know, most of the agriculture research is rate and date. On which day, how much fertilizer, how much seed, how much this we put, what was the result? That's not what I need now. New areas of research are coming in, big data analysis, artificial intelligence. In fact, AI is one of the core, will need so much of data that today we have no method to supply. We are not able to use AI, artificial intelligence, because we don't have the data for that. Improved sharing of farm-related resources and improved related services, farm-related through route mapping and scheduling. So there's quite a lot that we get benefits from sharing data by farmers. Next, please. Well, there are hazards also. A large part of the issue is ethics, which I find at this point in time a very big issue. I've seen so much, and this is something which I reported in, or I talked about in a GODAN paper. I said, show me how many of the developing countries have these international level or large national level data management systems for agriculture, whereas small companies from Europe come and say, oh, you give us, we will give you weather data. Kenya is getting it. XYZ countries. In, you know, if you look at the broadcasts or podcasts on this area, oh, agriculture data is not available in Africa and we are going to provide it. There are those type of projects. And why do they do it? Because this helps them improve, they sell the data or they use that data to improve the marketing of their products or forecast yields. So there are a lot of ethical issues that are very unclear about this. They buy it at very low prices. They'll say, we'll give you a free soil health report. You give us the data. But they take away the data rights. It's just like your Facebook or XYZ saying, oh, you give us your contact list. Otherwise, you can't use my software. Now, that's a wrong ethical practice. Why does Facebook want to know whom I'm going to have in my contact list? So this is one. Privacy issues. We have seen these almost everywhere. Revenue records are known, even in Europe. But when the farmer asks for data, and I have a friend of mine called Walter Meyer who works on this, when he asks data, it takes 9 months to get. But when they want that, the government wants data, it is supposed to be provided immediately. Security issues are there. Safety issues, ownership issues, of course, There is a speaker who will talk on much more on these issues. Valuation issues, either intentionally undervalued or overvalued. Next, please. We have monopoly. Some people say we won't share. John Deere is a classical example of not sharing any data that they collect on their tractors. You can't even repair your tractor. Helmification, which is if you fail, people here start to fail on what they want as data standards, representing farmers. The government comes in. It's something, this term has come because of the helmet use in Sweden, that when they had to wear a helmet, when it was asked as a community thing, they didn't follow. So the government said, you must wear helmets. This has happened in almost all countries. This Californication occurs when a single part of a large market, supposing you're going to sell food, everything to Cargill, then Cargill will set the standards of data that you want to give. Valeria and others who work on RDA and others, have they talked to Cargill? These are the type of issues that we will be starting to face. Generalization. You take the data and you say the average is this. That's a very dangerous way of looking at data. Right to forget. How are you going to ensure that my data is either to be forgotten or to be kept for some time? Forceful revelation of data other than necessary for a purpose. I've talked about the contact list issue. Censorship, spying, and giving data to unauthorized agencies or illegally. For example, we had a recent case in India in which the revenue department, the income tax department, started looking at land when people started saying that we are using this land for agriculture and farming, and this is the income from farming. The government started cross-checking it by using satellite data. Was it legal? That's the issue. It may be that it is bad practice and they were trying to evade taxes, but by the rules set by the country, was it legal is a question. Of course, the other issues that we are not going to face is the interoperability, linked data, and portability of data. How are we going to control that? It's not just saying, okay, we'll have the standards. We have lots of literature on interoperability, because a large part of the data is not going to be collected by the farmer physically. Most of these systems are based on machine-to-machine transfer of data using IoT, the Internet of Things. So don't underestimate both the benefits and the hazards from data. But it's good that we should know about these things. Next, please. Okay. When we talk of farmers, farmers are not homogeneous. They are corporate, large farmers, small farmers in developed countries with access to farmer organizations, and therefore they have some power. And then there are farmers in developing countries with or without access to farmer organizations. Or most of the developing countries, I see, and Africa is one important country where cooperatives were set up and they were destroyed by the government itself. Aggregation of farmers is looked upon as a large political hazard everywhere. Though you don't bring farmers together. And I would say Mao Zedong should be responsible for that, because he said he created a peasants' revolution. Next. Okay, so this is the way, if the capacity of farmers to manage and use data are dependent on whether they are corporate, large or small, whether they are in a developed country with well-organized agriculture food market chains, or with very open, evolving market-oriented agri-food chains. If we did not have supermarkets, driven agriculture, or fast food restaurant, would there be so much of a stress on data-driven agriculture is a question that I have not got an answer yet for. So organized agri-food market chains cannot exist without good farm and data information systems. That's why we are forcing or moving into data-driven agriculture. In developing countries with chaotic market chains, good farm data and infra are not to serve their market chains. They serve foreign organized market chains because of this globalization. Thus, sharing of data does not benefit their agriculture and farming. They are a part of the data-driven agriculture, but it doesn't benefit their farming. Next, please. So this is now the question, is data-driven agriculture a boon, enabling smallholder farmers to have better livelihood, or a curse threatening their existence? Because those farmers who will not be able to cope with data-driven agriculture are going to be thrown out of the agricultural system. And what happens? India has got 55% of its population depending on 14% of GDP. And if you remove, even at the moment, what I see is that the government is not very happy about developing agriculture for the simple reason that they need people for industry. Now, if you are going to remove 30% of the population and move them in about 20 years, China is also trying to do the same thing. What happens? While China is still organized, housing is very costly, but most of our countries, developing countries, well, if you don't mind, I'm coming to the closure of this, but I need to explain some things for. So what happens? You're going to create slums, and slums were not there about 50 years ago. Today, look at the amount of slums you have all over the world in developing countries. That is because we are displacing people from farming, putting it into urbanization and creating a problem. Next, please. Okay, these are some of the issues that have challenges. I'm sure the presentation is available. My email is also there. You can discuss that with me. Next, please. I wanted to draw your attention to what I consider as open and closed information chains in agri-food systems. We have been working on this since quite some time. This is the laissez-faire market, open. And we expect, though these flows are not very perfect, we expect information to flow as a network across. Next, please. If we bring in cooperatives, what happens? The cooperative takes over some of these activities. There are different types of cooperatives or producer markets or producer organizations. They might be handling only farmers, they might look at input, they might look at logistics, they might act as market intermediary. So take, for example, the National Dairy Development Board, the very famous milk cooperatives in India are in this model. So the farmer is devolved out of the rights of, or should we say responsibility of managing data that is taken over by the cooperative, and the cooperative relates itself to other players and actors in the market chain. Now what happens, because research and innovation happens, it becomes a very important, so the cooperative deals with it. The National Dairy Development Board has its own research wing. Similarly in Australia we have the Grain Research Council. So this is the way new systems are being evolved to look at data. Next, please. What happens if there is a supermarket or a fast food restaurant chain? Is there anyone here who has sold something to the supermarket, or are they a part of the supermarket system as a farmer? Anyone?
You get audited and you supply them.
You get an order and you supply. Do they provide you with?
You get audited first on their gap.
All right.
And then you supply them.
They provide you with the seed, they provide you with all other information. They're still not those type of supermarkets that I'm talking of. They are evolving. Most of the supermarkets, and you please look at Food Incorporated, a very nice documentary, about 3 years ago it was there and still available on the internet. And you would find that they control the entire, because they have to control the price. And if they have to control the price, they have to control the information flow. And that is what is going to happen. If McDonald's is going to take meat from something, they have to control the whole agri-food system. That is limited to them. They are not going to share that data. So these are some of the issues. I have dwelt on some other papers about this issue in much more greater detail. I can share it with you if you want. So an entire ecosystem has to be developed to support smallholder farmers if they want to participate equitably in data-driven agriculture. Next, please. The second thing I'm very much convinced now is that if we want to have open innovation, which is the most important thing with open data without open innovation and open technologies will not work. We need to create digital platforms, and this is the type of digital platforms I'm talking of. I can give you more info. This is where a large number of these apps that we have already produced would be much more useful with interoperability and linked data and all the rest of it. So who will be the pharaoh here? Remember I talked about the pharaoh in Egypt. Who then becomes the pharaoh is the issue. Next, please. And of course, what we need to do, large part of that ecosystem, we will need to do international arrangements, we need new institutions, policies, strategies, inclusive development of data standards, which I find still a major issue, capacity development of farmers. No, there's hardly anything done in the data circle in most developing countries. In fact, India, Mr. Tiwari will tell us, will know more about that. Virtual aggregation of farmers, how do we do this virtual aggregation? Because cooperatives have failed, collectivization has failed. What is a new way that we would look at? We need trust centers and data repositories, which will be the way to use data. Next, please. We need inclusive governance of flow of data, information, knowledge, skills, technology, through these institutions. We need new business models which are more norm-based, ethical in nature, platforms, open technologies, improving rural access to internet and lowering the cost of hardware and software. I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Of course, this is an existential challenge. If you are not able to solve, these small farmers are going to come out of agriculture. And if they come out, the entire diversity, all those of us who want to protect agriculture, remember it is agriculture. You are going to attack the culture part of a society. Thank you very much.
Do we have people who are directly involved with farming, the farmers themselves? Yes. Okay, so we've got a few of those, and we've got people who are working with service provision, service providers to supporting, and they're supporting the farmers. Do we have people here in the room for that? Okay, excellent. Commercial farming, do we have anyone who is into commercial farming? Okay, all right. And data service providers themselves that are actually working with the farmers? Private companies, okay, we do have private companies as well. The government, coming from the government, CSIR, those that are into research, okay, we've got people that are coming from research. We also have got people that are coming from outside South Africa. So let me just see by the show of hand if you are coming from outside South Africa. Okay, most of the people in the room are coming from outside South Africa. I will just pick Amanda where you are, the nearest person who is coming out from South Africa. Let's see if they can introduce themselves. Just 1 second.
Hello everybody, my name is Piwe Manjengwa. I work for a national NGO in Zimbabwe and work directly with smallholder farmers. Thank you.
I'm Johannes, co-founder of Farmbook. Thank you for the opportunity to present you today. Thank you for all the sponsors, quite a good initiative. A lot of information that was openly shared. I think actually a lot of intellectual property got shared. But yeah, all for the greater good, and I think that's the essence of what we were trying to achieve. So if you look here, we got a little chameleon, and the thing about a chameleon is it's adaptive, it's dynamic. It's a predator, and so yeah, the core is to create something that's versatile, can change, because we are dealing with an industry that's constantly in the change. So, in the next slide, please, Valeria. No, you're going to now. Or not? Okay. So before I tell you, actually to follow on the previous speaker, before I actually tell you the essence of what we're trying to achieve, I think we must actually just face the realities about agriculture at the same time. And if you look there, what was mentioned by the previous speaker, the farmer is right in the center of all these conflict situations around him and all these variables of which he is not in charge. Except for that, if you were to think about it, the farmer is not only a price taker, he's basically a taker of everything. So people are telling him, what are we going to pay you for your product? People are telling him, what are you going to pay for your inputs? These political policies, mandates, and then just to top it all off, we get a drought. So that's the daily life of a farmer. Definitely not the easiest thing on earth. So in essence, if I could read it off there, Farmbook is an online risk management platform that uses big data and technical information administered within blockchain technology to improve the sustainability of commercial and small-scale farmers in Africa. So if we look there, it's a bit quick. She will just replay that one. But just from a basic risk management point of view, we've got all the crops on there already, all the diseases, all the infections. From there, it's one thing knowing what the problem is. Obviously, we would like to take action about it. So on top of that, we got all the remedies. For South Africa, where can we buy them? I think that's a big problem going into Africa. Supply, I do have this problem. Where can I go? So we try to create a closed loop, purely risk management with the supply of information. For this, we go from fertilizers, we've got tractors, we've got equipment, we've got plant, we've got basically not all the information, but I think we are on about 600,000 pages of information already on the website. It grows on a daily basis. But yeah, like I said, risk management with the incorporation of timely information, but not just timely information, but relevant timely information. Next one. So obviously, the hot topic is data. Like the previous speaker said, it's what you do with the data. So yes, we are also in the creation of a profile for every farmer that we do get. The thing where we're looking at what do we do with it, we have to create everywhere where information comes at a price, unfortunately, and you need to create business models to pay for the information, to keep the information sustainable. So there's no need creating a portal and it's just money being dumped into it, being dumped into it, being dumped into it. And at the end of the day, like was said by the previous speaker, you got your suppliers who actually walk away with a profit. So what we would try to give you a small example, what we do is we would track a farmer And based on that, we can create a risk profile for the bank. Now he can maybe actually for the first time in his life qualify for financing. Same with insurance. Based on his gap, we can now go and say, right, we're going to create a insurance policy for the smallholder because the risk is not so high. It's a risk you can embrace. Let's make it more cost effective. I mean, I'm a commercial farmer. There is some insurances I cannot afford. It's just too expensive. But if you look at my practices, it's very much on par what I must do, when I must do it. It's just that there is a lot of, even when we can take it further to farm laborers. Some of them are seasonal workers. That information you can get from farmers. So say you got, for instance, a funeral policy. Let's change the payments on a funeral policy from 12 months of the year where you only make payments for the 6 months for which you do have a salary. And then it's more sustainable. So that's sort of where we try and get into the value chain by creating products for farmers, for farm workers, which help the farmer in the end of the day. Currently, there is really a lack for services like that. So next slide, please. So how do we do it? If you look at the bottom there, where the previous speaker was talking about artificial intelligence. There's a little thing I changed it a bit, and I got the copyright on that. We call it agrificial intelligence. It's just because there's so much data that can be aggregated. So yet again, like I said just now, from the satellite imagery, here we can see cumulative water use, crop protection, but except for crop protection, I've got filters for non-drought related stress. I think I've got about 17 or 18 filters that I can put on top of a satellite. Satellite imagery running at 2x3, which is 6 squares. That's quite a zoom. And you can actually track somebody's progress throughout the season, whether it's a cooperative or whatever the case might be. And that's data you can actually, that the farmer you can aggregate, give it back to the farmer and say, you take this data to the bank and tell them, I know what I'm doing. Here's my progress for the last 2-3 years, because that's another thing people don't understand about data. The thing is, you need historical data too. And you need to, the quicker you start building a data group, the better for your profile and future. It's like your credit rating, basically. And the same if you want to go to the bank, go to the insurers, tell them, listen here, except for frost or hail or something that in the weather that we cannot predict, the risk, I have not as a big risk factor based on the following portfolio. And currently that's not out there. Right. So why are we looking at blockchain technology? Immutable data. So we are trying to get the data to a point where data is actually got integrity. And by the use of blockchain into a ledger system, we can actually verify and say that, you know what, on that day, there was maize, and the maize was 70% throughout its physiological stage. So that's where it came. Nobody can fiddle with the information. It is what happened, because at the end of the day, the information on the input side depicts the information on the output side. Right, next one. I think there's quite a big problem in Africa, but something we can actually sort out with yet again with is that it's not as easy to transact. It's actually quite a big barrier to entry. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in Zim, but I mean, to use an example, that's the biggest difficulty for us to actually sell something to Zimbabwe, because we can't get more than 25,000 Rand out of Zimbabwe at a time. That's $2,000 US. I need fertilizer, I need a tractor or whatever. So if we can get a way of transacting and say smart contracts, data integrity, that's the kind of stuff we're already building based on blockchain technology for not calling it a universal currency, but a currency that works for you. A currency that's not trade driven, a currency that is value driven. Right, next one. On the same side, the big thing that we see is that traceability, your gaps, quality control at this point in time is is a very big barrier to entry, actually larger than trading tariffs. So the whole thing what we're trying to incorporate in here is if we can simplify it and standardize it, and everybody are speaking the same language, I think the trading process will be much, much easier, and the technology out there is capable of doing this. So another thing we can do is just by creating little co-ops, or the sharing economy as it's known in more financial books and whatever. So the motto there, or the main essence, is access will trump ownership. We'll maximize your asset productivity, but not just, remember, assets. Remember, it's not just a truck or a farm. It's also your intellectual assets. So, and obviously bringing the economy of scale to your smaller farmers. That's, I think, the most important thing. We got a tendency in South Africa where the small farmers are actually falling away and the big farmers are just getting bigger. So you can actually go as far as having organized agriculture online as well. No need for a meeting every month or every 2 months. A lot of people are staying in remote areas. They can't always make it. You're always struggling to get mandate because you don't have a quorum here or there. And yet again, with the blockchain, you can actually have a legit election for that matter, because nobody can fiddle with what's going on. Next one. Just on a smaller, even the first one was saying maybe more on a national level. Yeah, on a local level, no local, you don't need to have any fees or whatever. So, and we can address just problems that on the farms that everybody has got. It might be industry is not providing, or I'm not feeling safe on my farm, or if we heard the other day that there's illegal tolling going on roads. Yeah, just the basic needs that we can actually create awareness amongst farmers. Next one, please. This is just a projection. Look, we built a platform already that can actually facilitate all of these. And you got different things of doing it. So obviously you will still need your agricultural organizations to drive policy. I think the big thing what's happening these days is that your organizations want to get involved in projects as well. I think let the guys do the projects, and let the guys who must drive policy. I don't think personally you can do both of them at the same time. So you can have your agri-agencies, or there's just an example, Agri All Africa, people who are driving projects throughout Africa. We can create, if we get to the point where we call it a Afriota, where we got a currency, so that's fine. And the IXO, basically, that's where your blockchain technology is based on the IXO. It's a functionality that's already been there, which we are plugging into, that we can actually administer what is going on. So you can have a guy in America who wants to invest in a project in Africa, and he can actually track as an investment what is going on in that project in Africa, because the data was getting back has got integrity and has been tested. Next one. So what I said was, everybody, obviously we get data from third parties, we manipulate it, turn it into products that we can actually add value to the farmer. And this is quite I think we can go on for years about this, but we also need to think about this, that they got this little triangle where you start off with data, and then you got knowledge, or you end up with data, information, and knowledge on top. And that is one for small-scale farmers, where if you look at organized agriculture, they actually start off with knowledge, because they've been doing it for years. They all need the same information. They always keep on needing, okay, what pest is out there? So information stays that's the only constant variable. And we gain data from them. I think a big thing where we struggle is to get the data from organized agriculture through to upcoming agriculture, because all the mistakes well, a lot of the mistakes that small-scale farmers are making have already been made by organized agriculture somewhere else. And I think those are the data. So the data that we get with the small-scale farmers is actually the data that must come from the farmers that was already in commercially active. What we are trying to achieve is that we want the data, it will always remain the farmer. So what we try and achieve is that you give us some data, I aggregate it, so I create a portfolio for you. You've got a data portfolio that you can actually use to go to a bank, go to an insurer, or go to your portfolio, because some co-ops, they screen you before you just become a member for your own greater good. So sometimes, yes, people say, oh, you're taking data. Yes, I'm taking data, but I'm giving data back. That makes sense in the end of the day. I can take the data that you get will be, I plant maize. The data I give you back is, I actually planted maize successfully this year. And that actually has more value than just telling somebody, I plant maize. The I plant maize part is important for a seed company. Because, okay, people, they are planting maize. I wasn't aware of that. I must get my teeth in there. That's all they're interested, just where are the people planting? But in the end of the day, what is keeping the people sustainable? That's the question we need to ask each other. Next one. So yeah, we got, obviously, you can't do this alone. I think to get back to your question just now, who's going to be the pharaoh? I think the problem is everybody wants to be the pharaoh. And nobody, I think if we can have less pharaohs and more collaboration, then it will work much better. So we've got a policy that where we can work and create business models that make sense to keep it sustainable. As far as possible, we get in partners, and the partners are growing on a monthly basis, to be quite honest. Those are just some of them. I've got more. Obviously, except for partnerships, you must pay for your functionality. Just next one. And then, yeah, these are just some of our people who are actually paying us. At this point in time, we do contextual geolocated advertising. That's one of our main income streams, except for getting into the value chain as well. But yeah, obviously you need something that is sustained. Like I said, our business model is to get industry involved to make agriculture more sustainable, rather than getting government or NGOs involved to make it sustainable. In the end of the day, if there's no farmers, none of these companies will be making any sort of money anyway. So just think about that. In the end of the day, they need us more than they need when we need them. So yeah, next one. And then yeah, this is the perfect world. If we can work with our third parties as an input, together with us, push it through all our interfaces and whatever we've got in our mainframe already. We can get, and very important, I think something we must look at is moving away from data and moving towards verified data. That's something that's really important, so we can have all the pest, disease, risk, whatever, in the end of the day, to create a big sustainable agricultural business. Thank you.
So Ajit, you talked a lot about the value chain and trying to look across that. That's a large piece of work to do. Where's the starting point to actually impact such a large system?
The consumer. I think the consumer is where we start, not the farmer. You want me to explain it further? Yeah. Okay. Ultimately, who decides the market? It's the consumption of the particular item. And that data, when it flows back, everyone else gets involved. Say, take for example, if a consumer has a particular preference of a particular food or a particular agricultural commodity, I'll give you an example of tulips. You know, tulips change every year. A new type of tulip, and how do they predict tulip, which type of tulip? Because remember, the tulip is a bulb which has been planted 1 year before, which flowers this year. So you have that lag is of 1 year. So how will you predict which tulip will be needed for the next year's season? Because that is directly linked to the decor or the fashion that is there. So what tulip bulb producers do is they look at fashions before 2 years, and from there, because the trend will be there, they predict. So the consumer is the one who drives the entire data system all the way till the farmer, because the farmer needs those bulbs to plant 1 year before, so that the next year they get the tulips. So you understand, ultimately it's the consumer who controls this. The problem is we have no mechanisms at the moment in conventional marketing systems. So I think you understand this. If you need some more, but these are, remember, most of the products that we will come into the market, these are usually what we call as products which are in globally competitive markets, are high value or middle value, and have a very high perishable issue. You know, of course, grains and all are there, but data, as I say, data becomes more important as the perishability and the market size increases. Yes, please.
I think maybe one that might be applicable to all the countries. If government say they have got an agricultural department or whatever the case might be, and they do research, right? Effectively, the research was done by means of taxpayers' money. Would you say that that information should become public knowledge immediately?
I fully believe in it. There are two processes that are going on across the world. One is what I call as the democratization of learning and the democratization of science learning. Today, if you look at anybody who has got a cell phone or a smartphone has access to learning. And that doesn't mean you don't need to be formally, you see, even the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, can offer you all the courses that it teaches in the university to anyone. It's open, right? So one is the democratization of learning. Remember, learning is not that new a phenomena, formal learning. The universities were very close. They were very elitist almost till the middle of the last century, which was only after the Second World War when soldiers came back and they had to enter into livelihoods in a different way. They were given the wherewithal to go and learn. Otherwise, learning was an elitist thing. But what we are now facing in this millennium is huge opportunity for non-formal or informal learning. The second thing that is happening is what we call as mass innovation. Everybody here is an innovator. We can innovate. Believe me, with all my background, I still go to YouTube and see the best extension material produced by farmers. You go and see. If you have a problem on farming, and if you say, take for example, how do you tie tomatoes in your garden? Is a thing that, you know, and you search, I do it myself many a times, in spite of having learned quite a large bit of this area and having library. What you see directly on the video is something that convinces you how to do it. And those small video clips of 5 minutes, 10 minutes are so informative and educative. So mass innovation is already occurring. And if this data is also open, now the only problem we have is, say take for example, if you want to do pattern searching, which you know, the best algorithms are available with Google, Yahoo, and such companies. They are not going to give it to you. Remember the data I was telling yesterday night, that for the GeoAgri project, our estimate is 100 TB every fortnight. Now 100 TB data to process, you need big data analytics. You need a totally new type of look. Where is the computer systems that I need? Remember, in most of the agriculture universities, I have one of those persons who have been struggling to get the universities have those type of equipment. You know, the hardware, software, connectivity. While connectivity is improving, it's not improved to that level. But look at the university, at least in India I can tell you, the university syllabus and the course curriculums hardly bring all these issues. That's why I say none of your graduates are going to be useful to me. And that is something which I'm sure we have to start working on. Learning and formal education will be needed, but the direction is going to be totally different. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, sort of.
I tried my best.
We have now been realizing that data should be an integral part of agriculture, and we have to come out of the silos and collaborate all together. How do you see cooperate with private structure and aggregate data can create a data cooperative and trust center where government will be out if they don't change, and farmer can negotiate data use and also the benefits?
It's going to be an evolving ecosystem. It's not going to be today you have one and the other day you have the new one. It's going to be an evolving ecosystem.
Uh-huh.
And today, look at the sharing economy, which you were talking about. Say, take for example, governments regulate a lot of hotel business across the world. Do they regulate Airbnb? Is a question that, or Uber. Why is the government trying to control Uber? All over the world, you see Uber being, even a small thing being blasted up. Doesn't it happen in other taxis? Doesn't it happen it happens, right? But when a new order comes, the old order reacts to it. Now, I don't say, what is governance? Governance, most of the time we think the government and the people are in a conflict. In fact, it should be the other way around, isn't it? So these are, but remember, the digital economy or the amount of digital things that are coming, you yourself will be knowing in India. I said, after about 17 years when I started integrating back into the Indian society, I looked like I was a novice. I was so naive about things. But today, I don't have to move out of my house. And this is what I'm talking of in India, where all the services I can handle electronically. I mean to say Ola or Uber, my banks, my government services, everything is digitized, right? Now, who will emerge? If we really work properly, things will be, the society will evolve new mechanisms. That's what I'm trying to say. If we still look at it in an industrial age philosophy, we might have 5 or 6 corporates, across the world who are a Japanese corporate or so that's That's a high level of suppositions which you would go into. The most important thing is how does the society, how does the community handle this new paradigm?
Just to add on there, if you look at the Ubers and the Airbnb, I think I said it during the week, disruption actually made the industry smaller, but these disruptors got a bigger part of a bigger market share, where disruption in agriculture, I think it's the only industry that will actually make the industry bigger. Because the way things are currently going, it is stagnating. And I think this is actually quite a unique industry to be in, where it is actually completely the opposite of the norm. What do you think about that?
Well, I always believed that the data that the government gives us, say take for example, Indian government gives me the data that 14% of the Indian GDP is from agriculture. And I ask, what is the GDP coming in from agri-food systems? And that is about 38%, even now. And if you look at the entire, food is essential to every human being. Now, if you look at that, the GDP contribution would be increasing, not. And I think this is a sunrise area. We had an industrial revolution. Of course, forget the knowledge thing and all, but I think the next one is the agri-food realization change. Because medicinals will come in, nutrition comes in, all those type of issues will come in.
My name is Charles Budhia. I come from Kenya. I work with the Kenya National Farmers Federation. It is the umbrella farmers organization in Kenya with over 2 million farm families as members. While talking about digital agriculture, I think looking at Kenya, I can say we are a bit far, we are lagging behind. And the concept of value chain, agriculture value chains, is something that is coming in as possibly a solution to address the challenges in every segment of the value chain. But now looking at it data from the farmer side of view, we are still talking about farmers keeping the basic records. Before we talk about data, you talk to farmers about data. Maybe the only farmers who understand that language are the large-scale holders who comprise about 15% of the Kenyan farmers. The smallholder farmers who are the majority, might not understand the importance of, keeping their own records. This is an area that maybe we need to look at from the perspective of the government. Do we have the enabling legislation to ensure that farmers understand that maybe data could inform the agriculture markets. Today, we get farmers planting without, any due regard. Who am I planting for? We just produce food when the crop is ready. That is when I start asking aloud, where do I take my produce? Who will buy my products? There's that kind of, confusion or chaos, may call it chaos in the sector because of, there is nobody, including the government or extension, who is coming in handy to try to advise farmers that they need to keep their own data. Data is important for, organizing and securing markets for their products. The presenter has talked about agriculture cooperatives. That in Kenya, the kind of agriculture cooperatives that we have, that we could say are successful, are daily cooperatives. That one, we can say that those farmers keep data, but largely data is kept by the cooperatives for the purposes of marketing their products, not really farmers understanding the essence of their data. So I can say that we still have a long way to go. And I think this cuts across maybe many countries in Africa. Maybe we looked at South Africa yesterday, or within this week, we saw it's like the digital evolution in agriculture could have taken roots, but the rest of the, Africa, particularly Kenya, the small-scale farmers who are, the majority, are still lagging behind. Yeah, it's something that we need to look at.
Thank you. My name is Alpha Mtakwa. I am from Tanzania. I am a small-scale grower. As my fellow said, most of the African countries are lagging far behind on this issue of data and information. As a small-scale grower, I normally keep my records for future plans on what I produce and sort of the things. But I got that knowledge from these non-government organizations which teach small-scale growers on the importance of record keeping and data management. Though there are very few of us who does that. Data management and information keeping is mostly done by researchers and commercial production farmers. Those are mostly doing it. I've had a chance to work with a certain institution which was working with small-scale tea growers, and there we were measuring measuring the fields for the farmers' fields so as to know the size, and that could have aided us into knowing the requirements for fertilizer and herbicide so as to control the weeds in the farm, and that also could have given us the picture on how much they could produce. So it is mainly done by the commercial farms and the research institutions, but otherwise the small-scale growers like me, we mostly lag behind on all these issues that we've been discussing. So there is a great importance of this society and the community and the likes of GODAN and GFAR to much more move on into educating small-scale growers on the importance of data management and information. Thank you.
All right. My question number one is, we're talking about data and farmers. Yes, that's what you talk about. Should extension officers and the government, as you just rightly use the Uber experience as an example, should extension officers and the government be afraid of job losses and cuts? Should they be afraid of job losses and cuts because of data entering into our countries? That's my first question. How can data access be made more affordable for the very poor farmer? We are talking about data access to the farmer is very important. So how can this data access be more affordable to the farmer? And my last question is, if you just said that consumers drive the value chain, it is consumer that must drive the value chain. They tell us, okay, what to produce at what time and the quantity. Then whose responsibility is it to provide farmers with this information? Thank you.
Possibly I can try looking at the context of Kenya agriculture sector and looking at the issue of maybe the government and the extension service providers, particularly the public service, being afraid of job losses. I think by and large, Kenya farmers understand that the public extension service has collapsed. And with the devolution of the government system, whereby agriculture is a fully devolved function, that is, the small units of government managing extension, the kind of, in as much as we have highly qualified extension staff, the government at the devolved units are not able to facilitate the extension service providers to actually provide the most needed extension. There has been a program supported by the World Bank for some time over the last 1 decade, which has been driving reforms in the agriculture sector, whereby the sector needs to bring about reforms which will make the farmers understand that extension is no longer a public good. If a farmer wants to get extension, they need to go to private service providers for services, and they should be able to pay for those services. So, because the government is no longer able to provide those services. Currently in Kenya, I think for the last 1 decade or so, the government has not been employing extension staff within the ministry. So on this one, I think the government would not be really afraid that there would be job cuts, because it's looking forward is like, you know, it's not possible to continue providing this service as a public good. Yeah, I think, can I answer that one? No?
I would say this is again an issue of how we look at, as I said, say take for example, the agricultural extension systems in many of the developing countries were set up on the principle that agriculture is a development activity, it needs new knowledge and new information, and that will be provided with the extension. And this was from the perspective that agriculture is a development activity, right? Data-driven agriculture, as I said, is basically market-oriented agriculture, right? If it is market-oriented, and in all markets, it's the producer pays, is the rule that becomes successful. Now, do the governments should worry? In fact, my own experience goes that in addition to the government service, we are creating more employment. And this employment is much. So basically, at one side, why have the agricultural extension systems failed? Because they have been very, very costly. The World Bank, which introduced this whole concept of extension, has not realized that many of the developing countries, when the funding from outside stops, the thing that they will withdraw is those services they think are an essential. So it's a part of the government also. And in fact, they are happy if the extension fails at the moment, because they want to remove farmers from the agriculture and put them into the industrial sector. But if you look at extension system per se, or the advisory system, as you rightly said, these are going to grow tremendously. What we have is knowledge services. Agri-food systems will have much more greater employment prospects than the current agriculture. So I have a very, very high hope for that. The cost of data is going down, and the cost of its collection, because we are not talking of collecting data physically, we are talking of machine-to-machine transfer of data. Large part of the data that we will be using is not going to be generated by farmers going around. I sometimes think that this is a very romantic perspective which we are giving, people going with tablet or cell phones. That type of data is not the one that we are talking about. Most of this data is directly sensor-based data collected, and machines talk to machines. That's why I'm asking, who is the pharaoh and who is the farmer? At some point in time I would have asked the question, who would be the farmer? But Gratian tells me you only 2 minutes. So if something else comes up, otherwise during the whole day, whenever you find, we can discuss these issues, or even later, if you are very interested, we can go into it. But these are things which we don't, why is a car very much similar to a horse-driven buggy? Because that was our concept, so we created a car in that state. But supposing you ask someone to redesign the car as a vehicle of movement, he will design it, or it will be designed in a totally different way. This is exactly what is going to happen in agriculture. We are trying to put things which we knew about agriculture as we have learned. But the new agriculture is totally different. And we cannot at this point in time say how it will be designed. But some of us have started designing. Here is a good example of that sort of a thing that's coming up. A platform. Who owns the platform? It can be the private sector, it could be the public sector, it could be public-private partnership, it could be a community-driven platform. It can be Star Trek. Anyway, thank you very much.